Hello, everybody. This is Jessica Side with Everreal. And statistically speaking, 14% of you are going to need the services of my guest in the next year. And 70% of you are going to need his services in the next 5 years, because that's how often people move. I would like to introduce to you George Anderson with Building Tech Northwest. He is a home inspector here in Spokane, Washington, and I've asked him to come on today so that we could talk a little bit about inspections. He can talk a little bit about his business. And so welcome, George.
Hi, how's it going?
It's great. I'm so glad that you're here. Just a little bit of my history. I've known George for a long time, and I've been having him do inspections for me for a long, long time. And he is a fantastic home inspector. George, tell us a little, how long have you been in the business?
I have been doing this since 2006, 14 years.
14 years. That's pretty good.
Uh,
Yeah. And I've had
That's,
my license. I've had my license longer than you've had your license.
uh, that's amazing.
But that does mean that I have been literally using you for 14 years to do my home inspections. And so tell me a little bit, how did you get started? Why did you choose home inspections? Like, give me some history.
That's a story. I come from a background that perhaps some home inspectors don't. Way back in the 70s, I was an electrician for a couple of years, and then went to college as an English major, taught school a little bit, have an art minor, and that led into 25 years of communications, proposal writing, marketing, trade shows, all those kinds of things for high tech. Well, the economy in the world eliminated my office in Spokane for the high tech company I was working for. A friend of mine was a home builder. I went to work as a project manager for him for a couple of years. And then another friend was a realtor, not Jessica, but another realtor. And she said, hey, I have an inspector guy I use, and I think he's getting old and wants to retire.
Nice.
Maybe you should join him. And so she set up a meeting and we hit it off, and I ended up joining his company and taking it over. And that was 14 years ago.
And how long did you overlap with him? Like, how long did you work with him?
We worked together both of us doing inspections for about 2.5 years.
Okay.
And before I started doing my own, I went and joined him on about 50 inspections, just watching, listening, and then paralleling him and writing a report, and then sitting down with him and discussing that as we went over coffee.
It was like you were back in school. You were having tests yourself.
It was. And I, he would continually say, yeah, this is unique, or I've only seen this a couple of times. And it would have taken me 10 years to gain that knowledge that I really learned in 2.5 by working with a guy that had done 10,000 inspections before I started.
Wow. And that's mentorship. It's such an important in our industry. I mean, certainly when I have a new agent, right? I'm going to mentor them. I'm not just going to throw them to the wolves and see how they do. So this is kind of not quite on our subject, but what would you consider your favorite thing about home inspecting, and what is your least favorite thing about home inspecting? I mean, we're really spilling the tea now.
My favorite, honestly, is seeing people seeing people be happy about their home purchase, and by finding out that the home doesn't have a lot of issues, but also finding out that if it does have some issues, that there's ways to fix those. Or what they worried about wasn't hugely expensive, or those kind of. I love that part. First-time home buyers seeing that, hey man, we're able to buy a house and we're getting into it, and the house that we picked is at least okay, if not a lot better.
Yes.
So that's fun to watch that.
And I will say, before you give me your least favorite, I encourage all of my clients to be there for their home inspection. I think that, and there are some home inspectors that really don't like that. One of the things I really appreciate about you, George, is that you encourage that, and that you kind of give them, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but like, you know, you say, okay, here are the expectations. You let them ask questions, because I think it's so important. You know, getting a report is important, and we're going to talk about that process of kind of how we use the report. But just firsthand hearing you say, hey, this is a thing, you should look out for this, here's some solutions for that, I think is really important. So because of that, you get to meet so many homeowners, so many people who are so excited and anticipating living in that home, and they're nervous and excited all at the same time. So
it is. It's very overwhelming when they make an offer on a house. They've been in the house for 10 minutes, 5 minutes. Now they come and spend 2 hours, 2.5 hours at the house. That is overwhelming for people. So being able to put everything in perspective, even if it is problematic, put it in perspective. How bad of a problem is this? Or conversely, how easy or simple would it be to fix this, what appears to be a bad thing?
yeah.
So, you know, being able to help them through that overwhelming process is, again, one of my favorite parts of being a home inspector.
It's rewarding.
It is.
Yeah. I feel that same way when it comes to just my side of things. Yeah, it's good. All right. What's your least favorite?
My least favorite, and there's no hands down on this one. And I have to do it. We are required as home inspectors to traverse the crawl space of a home. That means crawl physically on your hands and knees, or sometimes your belly, crawl around the perimeter of that crawl space. And I am basically deathly afraid of spiders.
Oh, you are.
I
was going to ask you about that.
You know, I mean, there's not that many bad spiders in Spokane. There are a couple though that you don't want to mess with, and black widows, obviously. And there are hobo spiders will bite you, but they don't really hurt you at all. We don't have brown recluse spiders in Eastern Washington, thank God.
Okay.
But we have black widows.
Yes, we do.
And I have to crawl in that crawl space anyway.
It's like arachnophobia. Like it just.
Oh, I have to take deep breaths before I go down there most of the time, and I put a suit on and things. And
sure.
But one house, and it was for my brother-in-law. I opened the crawl space hatch, and there was 500 black widows staring at me. And that one, I said, Tom, I can't go in. I'm not going in there.
I can't do it.
I didn't go in it, and he had a guy come out and spray for him. But it just gives me goosebumps right now talking about it.
Oh my gosh.
So that's what I don't like, but it's critically important to go in the crawl space.
Absolutely.
And look around and look at insulation, water problems,
wood to earth contact.
Yeah, structural damage, bad electrics problems. I mean, all kinds of issues in crawl spaces. So you have to go.
Awesome.
So that's no.
I honestly think.
Except for that time.
I think that your favorite and least favorite would be also mine as well. So I guess that means I'm not going to be a home inspector, because I don't see myself doing that. So George, every time I bring a buyer to a home inspection, you take a few minutes to talk to them. And I thought it might be really helpful for people because what you're doing is setting expectations. So can you tell us a little bit how you set those expectations at the beginning of that home inspection?
I do. I mean, being licensed by the state of Washington, home inspectors are, the licensing department has requirements that we have to do. And one of them is to have an inspection agreement or contract. Technically it's a contract. We all call it an inspection agreement. And I use that as my platform. And so basically I'm saying, here's what we're going to look at today. Here's what the state requires me to look at. And I list those areas and identify that all those areas have thousands of little details. Thus, the inspection takes 2 or 2.5 hours.
Right, right.
I talk about what's not covered in a home inspection. And there's a long, it's fairly long depending on the house, but it's things that require lab testing. I mean, so I'm covering it, but oftentimes saying, well, we have to get this tested if you want to really know what material this is or things like that. We're required to talk about the limitations of a home inspection. It's really a visual inspection, a snapshot in time for the 2 hours that you're there. If it's not pouring rain out, are we going to see water entry through the, part of the house? Possibly not.
Yeah.
But usually those things leave signs. So we're looking for the signs of things that aren't occurring. And again, it's a snapshot in time. We talk about some of the things that home inspections just aren't, that people think they are. They think they're a code inspection. Well, they technically aren't.
Yeah.
Do I know the building code was in place in 1930? I'm familiar, but I don't know. So I'm answering two questions instead of was the home built to code.
Right.
I'm answering the question, is it safe? And I'm also answering the question, are all the components doing what they were designed to do? And will they continue to do that for a typical lifespan? So, and if I answer those two, I am answering code, because sometimes I say, you should make this improvement, even though this home was built to code in 1970.
Sure.
Like a deck would be a good example. I'm always telling people to attach their deck to their house in a better fashion than it was allowed in 1970.
Gotcha.
Because it's safe. So that's the best example. So I always get asked, is this a code inspection? Are you going to tell me my house is built to code? And I really am. I am,
that's
but
not
I'm
your
going
job.
in a about manner. No, it's not.
Gotcha. Well, you have a phrase that you use that I really love. And you basically said there's never bad news out of a home inspection. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, that's part of my little pitch. And I say, there's never bad news that comes out of a home inspection. And then I pause and people look at me like, well, that's not true. And I say, well, no, it's sometimes disappointing news and sometimes really disappointing news, but it's never bad, because you have to know this information before you are committed to this home. And I don't tell people directly, don't buy this house. I don't think I've ever said it. Well, maybe once or twice.
I think a couple of times I have heard of you doing that because the house was about to fall down. I did a house once that they built an addition, kitchen, bathroom sort of addition, or laundry room, bathroom. And it was on a crawl space, sort of. When I went in that crawl space, there was no cement foundation. It was completely sitting on dirt. And it had been doing that for maybe 40 years. So now it was about 6 inches shorter than it used to be, because the wood was all completely rotten and it was leaning. And so I looked at this guy who bought the house because it had a really nice shop. And I said, no, that's going to be a really expensive shop, because you're going to have to replace the house,
this part of the house. So he didn't buy that house.
All right. So how is that? So back to our thing, how is that not bad news?
Because that person just saved himself probably $20,000 by buying a good home inspection. If I would have said, well, the guy really wants the shop and this problem can be fixed, it can be, but it's $20,000 repair. You could build a shop for $20,000 on any house, so, or maybe not that little, but so I really saved that guy probably $20,000. He really wanted that shop, but it was a disaster, the house.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about a couple of things. We're going to talk about a few enemies of your home, of systems in your home. So we talked about the fact that before we got on this call, George and I talked about the fact that, some things have a lifespan that is this long, and you cannot extend that life. Like, it's that the entropy is going to get it someday. However, there are some things that you can do to make sure that lifespan doesn't go like this and shrink. So if you've got a 30-year roof, but you don't take care of it, and there's not some things that you make sure that you do, it's going to maybe be a 25-year roof. And so I just want to talk about those. I don't want to take a ton of time. I just want to give some quick information about some of the things as a homeowner you should look for. And of course, as conversely, as a buyer, you can also look for and say, ooh, that's going to be a problem. So let's talk about the roof first. So
Okay.
the biggest enemy to roofing, as far as I am concerned, are trees.
Right.
Trees.
Well,
Go ahead, George.
oh yeah, I mean, trees create shade, they create debris, they create moss, and that creates moss, that creates gutters that are full or poor drainage off the roof. And every roof is different because slope is different,
Absolutely.
orientation is different, all those things. But keeping the roof clean, free of debris, and then depending on your house and siding and orientation to the sun, it's gonna, like Jessica, like you said, it's not gonna last longer than 30 years if it's a 30-year roof, but it certainly could last less. And neglecting it could also cause other problems on other systems in the house that aren't related to the roof directly.
Yeah. So keeping trees, not just overhanging trees, but trees that are actually touching your roof are a real problem. So making sure, what's that?
I've seen holes worn through the roofing, through the underlayment to the roofing, and starting to wear holes in the wood decking. And the people didn't know it because the tree was so full and lovely and rubbing, but it was rubbing against the house every time the wind blows. It was just rubbing a hole in the roof. So yeah. And it potentially brings bugs and insects and carpenter ants and things like that.
Yeah, we talk about wood to earth contact, like on the bottom of but there's also the kind of that wood to earth contact. I mean, I know it's not earth, but that natural material brings all kinds of things, moisture, bugs, all of that. So yes. I think that's it. Go ahead.
We're supposed to talk about, when I talk about bugs or trees on exterior and roofs, we're talking about conditions that are conducive to the proliferation of rot, which would be water and moss and then insects. So eliminating conducive conditions to those things will at least get you to your lifespan of that roof or whatever the component is.
Absolutely. All right, let's now talk about just siding, because siding is a big issue as well. And what are some things that we can do to make sure that our siding doesn't deteriorate?
Good question. I kind of colloquially say to people as I'm talking, you need to become a student of your house, really. And siding's a big part of it. And I'm telling you, don't stand back in the street or on the sidewalk and look at your house and go, it looks great.
Okay.
You need to get up close and personal with it. And depending on the type of siding you have, that can be pretty important to critically important. Okay. Some siding, brick, really well-kept cedar and wood, that stuff's pretty durable and long-lasting. Some of the new materials out there are not. They are particle board, wafer board, composite. Those, if you don't take care of those, if you look at them from the street only, you might say, that looks pretty good. If you look up close, there'll be lots of places where water is trying to get to it. And unfortunately, I see it after the water has gotten to it.
Right.
And siding should never have to be replaced on a home, really. If you take proper care of it, it doesn't have a 20-year lifespan necessarily. I guess you could argue that eventually it will wear out, but if you keep it painted, caulked, water out of all the places water can get in, it will last. It will last 100 years potentially. Sure. Someone said if you maintained a car like the airline industry maintains an airplane, your car would last 200 years.
Right.
Now, and I think it's kind of true of a house, the siding. If you take really good care of it, keep your eye on it. I'm not saying you have to paint every year. I'm just
Right.
saying do proper maintenance and learn how to do proper maintenance. And that's what I talk about in my inspections,
Yeah.
depending on what we see.
So the three things: making sure it's caulked properly, so you don't
Yep.
have seams where the water is getting in. Making
Right.
sure it's painted. Painted is like the protective coating. It's not just a dress; it's the protective coating. It's like the armor of the house. So
Right.
keeping it painted, and then you also talked about gutters. You've talked
Right.
about that. Why do gutters protect the siding?
Yeah, it's, all the components of the house work together, or many of them. And the siding I was talking about, some of that composite siding, if you don't have gutters and you have water dropping off a roof 10 feet and hitting a sidewalk, what's going to happen? The 3 feet of the bottom of that siding for 3 feet is going to be sopping wet after every rainstorm. Um, so if you don't have gutters on the house and you don't acknowledge that, if you don't keep that siding well painted and caulked,
Right.
well, I mean, I've seen siding that's 5 years old that is fairly severely water damaged because there's no gutters and it was poorly painted originally, and no one ever really became a student of how to maintain it. So, some houses don't have gutters. A lot of builders don't put them on because it keeps the cost lower.
Yes.
And you have to decide yourself, do I need gutters on this home? I almost always recommend them.
Yeah.
Unless, I guess unless a house is brick and doesn't have on a slab, then where water is not going to hurt anything.
Right.
That's
because your gutters protect your house, but they also protect your basement from too much water getting in near the foundation as well.
Right.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, so last on this list is your furnace. So your furnace is only going to last so long, but there are definitely things that people do or don't do, I should say, that cause it to make its lifespan dangerously short. Very sadly. So what are some of those things that people should be doing?
Well, like you said, if you maintain a furnace really well, that a furnace that you would buy today will probably last 15 to 20 years because they're really efficient, and the components inside to increase efficiency wear out faster, and they transfer the heat much more efficiently. But so you're not going to get more than that on a furnace that you bought in 2020. It'll probably last 15 years. You might get lucky and get 20. A furnace that was built in 1950, you might still see one of those running today, but they're highly inefficient.
Right. Okay.
But so somewhere in between there is, if you keep it clean, have it tuned up every year, and keep the filter system clean by changing the filter anywhere from monthly to quarterly, depending on the filter, the furnace will run at optimal temperature. That means it won't get too hot. A dirty filter will make a furnace get too hot.
Yeah.
And heat is the enemy of a heat exchanger, believe it or not. Sounds funny to say, but so a furnace that overheats because the filter is dirty you'll take 25% off of that furnace's lifespan.
Yeah.
So just doing regular routine maintenance will at least get you to that predictable 15 to 20 year lifespan.
Sure. And I've seen it where, I go in with a home buyer and we look at the furnace, and on the furnace, it's got like, they're supposed to write, people who do the furnace cleaning, and so they write what it's going to, the day that they did the servicing. And I'm like, that was 14 years ago. Like, that's the last time somebody looked at this furnace, vacuumed it out, made sure everything was looking good. So maintenance and your furnace filter is something you can do. Find out if you need to do it quarterly, like you said, quarterly or monthly, and then just buy enough for the whole year. So buy 12 of them at a time or buy 4 of them at a time, set your alarm and just get that thing changed out. So those are
Really
some
important.
easy things you can do.
Yep.
Well,
And
George,
those three things we just talked about are the most expensive replaceable items on a house. So the roof is the most, siding would probably be more, but you don't have to replace
hopefully you
that.
don't have to do it.
Yeah. And then furnace system is pretty expensive also. So if you maximize their lifespan, you'll spend less money over your ownership of the home.
Absolutely. So George, I would like you to kind of wrap us up here by talking about, if I'm looking for a home inspector, if I'm one of those 14%ers right now that in the next year is going to need a home inspector, what should I be looking for? What are the things that are important in that person?
Good question. Well, certainly the obvious thing would be availability. One person can only do so many inspections. So, and I do a lot of inspections, but
How many
availability is
inspections,
important.
George, how many inspections have you done?
I've done, I haven't counted exactly, but it's over 4,000
Okay.
over the 14 years. So that's 200 something, like, divide that, it's 250 a year or something. There's some slow months every year, but and that said, I'm actually have another guy that's going to be joining me. 14 years ago, I joined a guy that had been doing it for 18 years, and he had done 10,000 inspections. Then we worked together for 2.5 years, and I took over, and I've been doing it for 14. And and I'm bringing on somebody that will repeat that process and make my company, Building Tech, more available to you, because in this market, instead of getting it 10 days, I'm being asked all the time, can you do an inspection in 2 or 3 days? So
right.
Which is a change over the time. Usually it was, oh yeah, I can get you in a couple of weeks, and everybody's happy by that.
Yeah.
Now it's can you do it in 5 days or 3 days, or so that's more challenging to do.
Absolutely.
So that's the main thing. Certainly I'm going to be available. Communication, in writing, professionally, doing 4,000 inspections and having a background in writing in English and marketing and communications has been very helpful to me. I don't know very many inspectors that are English majors. I am. And that the writing part of an inspection is easier for me, and my 25 years of writing for high tech has really helped me a lot.
Yeah.
And my report is really easy to read. It's a narrative style story about your house and all the components.
And let me just say this. So a lot of people, so just quickly the process, right? So you're going to call home inspector, you're going to call George Anderson. You're going to say, I need a home inspection by this time. You're going to meet George there at the place. You're going to walk through the house. And then the next day, sometimes same day, usually the next day, you're going to get a report. And that report is what then I get the phone call from my client, because we both get the report, and we sit down with that report and we will look through that report, and we're looking at the pictures, and it's hard to remember everything from that home inspection. What did George say about this? What did George say about that? So the report is really important. And let me tell you guys, there are some really bad reports out there that I'm like, what am I looking at? How is this? This is not helping me at all. And it's, it's all these pages. And so I think that I cannot overemphasize how important a good report is to this process, because that is what we use then to make our decision on if we're going to ask the seller to do anything, and how important it's going to be, and how is it a safety issue, those kinds of things. So just to reiterate, that report is very important.
It is.
The other thing I want to say about walking through the property, and I've kind of already mentioned it, but the communication piece, there are some home inspectors that don't, like I said, don't like it when the homeowner shows up, or easy for me to say, prospective buyer shows up. But I love that about you, that you want to communicate with them, that you want them to ask questions, that you are available to them, and that communication also. So you got the report, that's important, and you've got the actual, like, hey, I am here to answer your questions and to do a good job, not freaking you out that's the other thing, is some people just freak people out. And you're going to be able to give them perspective on, hey, this is a safety issue, but it's a safety issue that's only going to cost about $100 to fix, whatever that looks like. So I think that is also extremely important. So I think, in other words, I think you're right. Communication is key.
Yeah, I'm surprised because I do hear that, and occasionally, certainly I run into realtors that I haven't worked with, and they either say, well, I'm not going to have my client come until the end.
Right.
Or I'm not going to have my client come at all. And I have discovered over 4,000 inspections that if you can be there, it's you not only learn more about the house real time, but you also understand sort of the scope of the issues, because you can see them and you can hear me talk about them, and we talk about solutions or potential costs of repairs or
Yes.
ease of repairs. If you aren't there and you just read it in black and white, even if it's a good report, it sometimes sounds worse than it is.
Yeah.
Or
Absolutely.
conversely, it sounds sometimes better than it is. So, which I try to avoid in my report, certainly. But it's all a matter of perspective. So that's really critical.
And the other thing I will say is that you also don't disappear once you've done your inspection. You're not going, well, I'm done with that. I hope to never speak to those people again.
No, I tell people all the time, you got my card. That's for future reference, not only during the process of buying a home and going through the inspection process, but call me when you move in with questions, with potential contractors that you might want to hire. I know those people with more questions, because you're going to spend more time in your home in the first day that you're there than the 2 hours I spend in it.
Yeah.
So you might come up with, hey, what's this? I don't know what this is, and it didn't come up on the report because it wasn't a problem, but you don't know what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's incredibly important. So, and then the last thing that I think that is important, that I don't know if this is on your list, is just that experience. Just having someone that's done it a lot of times and knows what they're doing. I've seen, okay, how many inspectors when you first started, George? How many inspectors in Spokane?
When I started in 2006, there was about 40, 45, if you counted some guys that coming over from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, that were working in Washington. And now, and then in 2009, Washington State licensed home inspectors, and that kind of opened an industry for potential professionals. Now they're in Spokane. In Spokane and Kootenai County, and maybe the surrounding counties, there's 150 active, if not more than that.
Okay.
So that means there's probably 10 of those 40 have retired. So that means there's 30 people in town out of close to 200 that have more than a couple of years of experience. I mean, it's really important.
It is.
4,000 inspections or 40. Who do you want to hire? Now, I feel bad for the guy with 40 competing with someone with 4,000, but that's the real world.
Yeah.
That's why you should join a person like me, and that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I'm really excited about your new inspector. I think that's going to be great. It's going to, you've always been really available that I can see, but I know that I'm sure there are times when you do have to turn people down, and that you're going to be able to not have to do that. And I think that's absolutely fantastic. Well, George, thank you so much for taking the time today to talk to me. Before we finish, if someone wants to get in contact with you, how would they do that?
Well, the best way is my cell phone.
All right. You're going to get it out there for all? Let's hear it.
509-280-6546. That's the best way. I don't answer the phone when I'm at an inspection. So my message says, leave a message and I'll return the call in 2 hours. You can text me on that same phone. You can email me. George at Building Tech Northwest, NW actually, George at buildingtechnw.com. I have a website, www.buildingtechnw.com, and you can actually leave a message, inquire about an inspection there. And you can also see sample reports.
Oh, that's great.
Like that on my website. And I am on Facebook and Instagram, but honestly, that's not, that might be a little slower return.
That's not your cup of tea?
Not as, I mean, I use them, but not so much for work. Yes, so.
You don't want everybody on your Instagram. I need you to do a home inspection today.
Tweet for a home inspection.
Tweet for a home inspection. That's perfect. Well, again, I want to thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. You are a trusted vendor that I definitely recommend on a regular basis, and I appreciate you taking the time to be here today. And I hope everybody else has a great time. If you have any questions, you can reach me at our team at 509-62-HOUSE. And then if you want to get in contact with us, we've got websites, we've got social media. Come visit us on Facebook. And yeah, that's where we are. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye, George.
Okay. Bye.